Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this Around the Ropes episode right here on the new ATR network. As always, guys, you can find us on any social media account you can. We are live tonight, not only on YouTube, not only on Facebook, but we're back on Twitch once again. So, guys, if you're on there, hit the subscribe button on anything. Follow us. You know the routine. Guys, I know you guys normally will see me and Ryan on here, but like I mentioned last week, Ryan is currently on a hiatus from the program. Do not know when he's going to be coming back. So filling in for Ryan Peterson tonight from the Asylum Wrestling League, the one, the only Archie Mitchell. Archie, what's going on?
What's up, everybody? John, I'm glad to be here, guys. I've been on the show a couple times to poke fun at Ryan and talk to the guys, and John needed a stand-in, so I got some pretty big shoes to fill from Ryan, but I think I'll do my best to fill them.
You definitely will. But let's start right off now with what happened this past weekend.
Yes.
The site that everybody saw where Darby Allin almost ripped off half his skin going through glass.
Yeah. And apparently a fan got glass in their face because of the way it jumped up and jumped into the crowd. It was ridiculous.
But before we get into, the certain things, especially obviously we all know it was Sting's last match, overall, what did you think of the pay-per-view as overall?
Subpar. I have to be honest, subpar. A lot of the matches could have been saved for Dynamite or Collision, like that All-Star Scramble, you know what I mean? The FTR versus Mox and Claudio could have been on Collision. Something was off, Ryan. Oh, John, excuse me. Something was off, John. And it was a lot of botches, a lot of things that just didn't seem like the normal clean product that we're used to when it comes to pay-per-views from AEW.
I see where you're coming from. I think the whole show itself was overshadowed by Sting, unfortunately.
That's a good point.
And again, I'm not trying to crap on what Sting did. I mean, Sting had a phenomenal run. He was, he had wrestled, I think, consecutively since 85.
Yeah, 85, 86, I think.
Yeah, and I think realistically, I mean, any of those matches that we saw, we'll go over some of them here in a second. It didn't matter how well they did. And Ospreay and Takeshita, I'm going to say it right now, was the match of the night, non-Sting related.
I'll agree to disagree. I'm not a huge Will Ospreay fan. It's nothing that he does wrong. It's just I used to be a very big flippy guy. You know what I mean? I love the Young Bucks. I'm a Ricochet fan. But something about Ospreay, it just seems like as fast as he's going, he has to slow down in order to hit the move. So, you know what I mean? But against Takeshita, wasn't a bad match. I preferred a match a little further down the card at the beginning of the show. So, as far as that match of the night.
Well, like I would also say, I think you can also look at the triple threat match.
Yes,
with
triple threat
Swerve.
Match was great.
And did you notice, by the way, Swerve had a little bit of homage to Bray Wyatt?
Yes. His whole entrance was great. It added theatrics to the show, you know what I mean? And Swerve and Nana seemed to fit perfectly to get the crowd on their feet. I wish he would have went over, but I guess Joe is the gatekeeper right now for AEW until either MJF gets back or whatever the next plan is. Hangman did a good job too, but man, Swerve, since the Continental Classic they did, Swerve has been on fire.
I will say as much right now. I think by the time we end 2024, we will say Swerve World Heavyweight Champion.
Definitely.
I will say that. I will say that right now. I think with what you said it perfectly. Going back with what they did at the Continental Classic.
Yeah.
Which I remember I saw the finals of, because they did the pay-per-view right over here on Long Island.
Yep.
That whole tournament was really good. I just think, to me, I agree with you. I think they're either setting up for when MJF comes back or for something big. And I don't think it's going to happen to the next pay-per-view, which we'll get into that in a second, because that caused a little bit of a stir up. But I think we got to look at the bigger pay-per-view coming up in May, Double or Nothing.
Well, yeah, that's one of their key pay-per-views. That falls in line with the All-Ins, the All-Outs, and Double or Nothing. And it's AEW as a whole for me, the last couple of months has been lacking. And I don't know if it's the wrestling or the lack of storytelling lately. You know what I mean? Obviously, the Swerve story has been great. MJF and Samoa Joe kind of got derailed by Adam Cole getting injured, but just the rest of the product has just been lacking for me. And I'm a guy that look for anybody listening because you guys probably don't really know me that well. I watch New Japan. I watch the Indies. I watch wrestling as a whole, and I don't like crapping on the product. But when you leave what was your bread and butter and start doing something different and changing things up, and you push guys who, in my opinion, don't really need high profile matches to be pushed instead of the guys who deserve it, it starts to make things suck a little bit. That's just where I'm at.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, though, about, where has AEW gone wrong? I've said it for a while now. One of my biggest gripes with AEW is the lack of storytelling.
Right.
Is that you can see like on a Dynamite, for example. Okay, I'll give you a great example. The Dynamite that's coming up this week in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
They announced Jay White versus Darby Allin.
Right.
What's the story?
Right. Right. Where does that leave Jay White? What does it do for Darby? Darby got basically the shaft a little bit, in my opinion. And the reason I say that, and look, he got the rub from Sting. It made him a bigger star, yes. But now he had to give up his title. He was a tag team champion. He gives up the belt, and you immediately put him in a match with, okay, Jay White's great talent, but what does it do for him if he wins? Jay White's not a contender to anything.
I think the way they could have done it better is not said that what's his face? Sting's last match would have been Sunday.
Right.
But say that this week was his final Dynamite.
Right. Let him vacate the title on air.
Yeah, let him have that moment. And then it would, but I also think, realistically, you knew they weren't going to have him in a singles match.
Right.
He's at that age where him in a singles match wouldn't have worked out. Also, who would you have done a singles match with him? Him and Rick?
No. Rick could barely throw a chop during the match just now.
I think at one point, I still think they're scraping Rick off the floor as we speak.
Yes. I'm a big Ric Flair fan. I'm a big Ricky Steamboat fan, and I used to be a huge Sting fan. Surfer Sting is what got me into WCW. The Flair Sting match at, the 45-minute draw at Clash of the Champions, and it was having him join the Horsemen, having him win his first world title, all of those feuds, with his feud with Luger, when Rick Rude debuted and they feuded over the world title then. And then the Crow thing happened, and it was like, okay, this is cool, this is innovative, I like it. But after he left TNA and went to the WWE and he got injured, him showing up in AEW as more than just a mentor or a manager, and everything he's done, you're right. He didn't. He couldn't put on a singles match against anybody.
No. And the funny thing is, I don't know if you saw, somebody asked him, was he inspired by the Crow? Because I think they just announced that they're finally they're rebooting the Crow. I think coming out in June or July of this year. I think.
Yep.
Do you know that was never his intention?
According to him now, yes, he was never inspired by the Crow. Right.
That supposedly it was Batman and I forgot who it was. Like Batman is like probably the two most random things you could ever think of.
Right.
But I heard that, I'm like, you're saying this now when the reboot of Crow is about to come out. How interesting time was.
From what I read in a report, he mentioned that it was nothing to do with the Crow. But in other interviews with Eric Bischoff, Scott Hall, it was actually Scott Hall's idea, apparently, for him to do this. He said, hey, Sting, have you ever seen the movie The Crow? Sting was like, no, I've never seen it. And he told him about it, and Sting fell for it and was like, okay, let's do it. Let's try it, having never seen the movie. But that maybe Sting was saying this now so that he couldn't, maybe they didn't sue for copyright infringement. I don't know. He was covering his butt. What I find odd is that we went from Brandon Lee and Sting almost looking identical in their Crow gimmicks to the new Crow looking like Darby Allin.
Isn't the guy who's playing the new Crow, isn't he the same guy who played the clown?
In It, I think.
You're right. He looks, and I was sitting there and go, wait, Darby Allin's about to be written off TV soon because I know he's about to go climb Mount Everest or something.
Right.
I'm like, are you sure he wasn't in the movie beforehand?
AEW was watching like, hey, that's the guy that ripped off the original. Let's rip off his tag team partner.
Yeah, and to me, but I mean, I also know, and we'll get more into what's going on with AEW in a second here. But we opened up the show with Christian Cage and Daniel Garcia. What I was surprised by this, I really thought Adam Copeland was going to somehow make an appearance somewhere.
I did too, and if you recall, we were in our group chat with the fantasy wrestling group, and I said it's funny. Adam Copeland left WWE because they didn't want to give him a full-time schedule, but here he is being written off of TV because he did too much in his first 2 months in AEW. It's like, how do you get? He's not really injured. This is just their way of prolonging him versus Christian. And I get it, slow burn. That's great and well. And I'm not faulting Daniel Garcia in any way. Daniel Garcia did a phenomenal job, but Christian was botchy through that whole match. He was slowing down. He was stutter stepping. He was falling. It was like, I don't get it.
Then there was the one spot they had Garcia. I don't remember where he was, but I know he was towards the announcers.
Mm-hmm.
And Nick Wayne, I don't know if he was trying to go for a cutter.
Yeah, and
it looks. I'm sitting there going, "Oh my!" And then of course they had Matt Menard come out of nowhere.
And Matt Menard killed Luchasaurus, which was like, wow, Matt Menard's that big of a badass.
Well, I was telling Ryan because I was watching interview with Ryan. I go, here's your next match for either Rampage or Collision. Matt Menard versus Killswitch.
Right, in which Killswitch will probably murder Matt Menard in that match.
And the other part I laugh is all of a sudden Mama Wayne, whatever, I don't know. Also, she's getting involved now?
Do you know she's appearing at a wrestling show here in New Jersey with her own table? I'm like, who the hell's going to see Mama Wayne?
Well, I think she's also going to be at big event actually in out here in Long Island.
If she's not there with Nick, why is she there? We literally made this woman a wrestling celebrity.
It's her 15 minutes of fame. Let's just call it what it is.
And I get that, but come on, we didn't make the woman who was playing Shelton Benjamin's mama a celebrity when she was in WWF. It's like, why? I get it. I understand Nick Wayne. Look, I don't know what the hype is around Nick Wayne. I saw the vignettes when he was coming in. He's a Darby Allin prodigy, and his dad was a wrestler, and his dad passed away. God rest his soul. I'm not pulling a Christian here and going to say anything bad about the man's father. But Nick Wayne is all hype. And they killed the Luchasaurus character by putting him with Christian of all people. This is just a weird. It's almost like the Oddities 2024.
Well, that's what I don't get because I remember back at World's End when they had that battle royal and Killswitch, and I'm going to just call him Luchasaurus because that's what I know him as.
Yeah.
And he won the title. I'm like, okay, they're going to play some shenanigans here right now. Yep. And I remember in that match, because again, folks, I was lucky enough to be in the audience for that show. And all of a sudden, Adam wins the belt. I'm like, okay, Luchasaurus is about to come out. And I thought he was going to turn face.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, Christian's like, give me the thing. I'm like, what is this? The I win a Rumble or I win this. So I'm going to give it to you instead.
Right.
I mean, unfortunately, as much as I like to crap on AEW for doing that, WWE just did that with Cody.
They tried to. They got backlash.
That's a whole other story for another day.
Yeah, that was. Look, I think we all kind of got worked a little bit on that whole Cody thing, but that's another story, like you said. But yeah, the whole Edge wins the title for 30 seconds and then gets cashed in on, which he's done to people before. We know that. Mm-hmm. By the way, that title match that Luchasaurus won was never named a cash-in ability type of thing. It was just assumed when he got to the ring and said, I want my match now. You know what I mean? They never told us he could do it later on in the night or tomorrow or whatever.
But, and I remember being there, and when he won, I'm like, yeah, they're about to pull some trick or something.
Yeah,
But
this is.
I'll be honest, I think the weakest match of the night, and it's nothing, and I'm not trying to be a hater, so to speak.
Mhm.
Weakest match of the night to me was the women's match.
Yeah, it was a little slow. It was very predictable. About the biggest highlight for me in that whole match was Mariah May coming out dressed like Tony Storm.
Well, the funny thing is, like I said, Ryan and I went to a Dave and Buster's out in Long Island, and all of a sudden, you hear the music. Everybody's like,
Right.
"Oh my God, it's Tony Storm!" I'm like, "That's not Tony Storm."
Right. Yeah. As soon as she stepped through, she's too. I was like, she's too tall to be Tony Storm. I'm like, that ain't Tony.
But again, I'm not trying, because one thing when it comes to this program, I'm a very huge proponent of women's wrestling.
Oh, I am too. I am too.
A lot of times I think women's wrestling is some of the best wrestling out there. But I think with this match, because I think I remember correctly, this match was right after the FTR Blackpool Combat Club match.
Right.
Which, by the way, kudos to Blackpool Combat Club for coming out with the Road Warrior.
You like that?
That was a nice little nod there to them.
They could have at least painted their faces then.
Or they could have at least come in through the entrance with motorcycles if they really wanted to.
Right. Something.
But honestly,
the Iron Man.
And they had freaking Metallica playing for Sting. Why not?
Right. But yeah, no, the women's match was a little slow, very predictable. And I don't know what Deanna and Tony just didn't seem like they had chemistry together. Although they're friends, they just weren't working. They weren't meshing the right way together.
No, and that's my whole thing. And again, I'm only saying it because look at how intense that tag match was beforehand.
Right.
You have to follow that.
Well, yeah, I agree with that. But I could have, even if the crowd would have been dead silent during it, which they weren't. The crowd was hot for it. But they just weren't. They weren't up to par with what I've seen both Tony Storm and Deonna Purrazzo do in the ring with other women. And you look at the other side of the coin on the kickoff show was Julia Hart and Sky Blue versus Statlander and Willow Nightingale, and they had a phenomenal tag match. So the women were doing well that night. It's not like they did any, like you said, women's wrestling sometimes is better than what the men are putting out there. But then I just think maybe Tony and Deonna were just off. It was like their first time actually wrestling each other anywhere, other than if they did it on the Indies. I'm not sure.
Oh, they probably have, or I think they may have done some stuff over in the UK.
Right. So, but I mean, here they just didn't mesh well for me. It might have been, it was, in my opinion, that was not the worst match of the night, but the one that was lacking the most.
Oh, I can tell you the worst match of the night. It was very easy to figure out which one.
Go ahead.
The 8-man All-Star Scramble.
Oh, you mean the match that was originally named Meat Madness?
Yes, that one.
Why would you name?
The issue I had with that match, and maybe this is the Jim Cornette side of me, is when they had the moment when you had Powerhouse Hobbs, Lance Archer, Brian Cage, and I'm forgetting who the fourth guy was. Wardlow. And they're all doing poses in the middle of the ring. I'm like,
and the crowd is chanting meat.
But then on the flip side, then you had all the 4 small guys doing it. And I'm going, and the thing also, maybe it's just I don't watch Collision that much. They had the guy Magnus, who I know he's from CMLL.
Right.
I remember he comes out, looked at Ryan, and go, Nick Aldis is wrestling under a mask now?
When I heard the name on Collision, I went, wait, why is he Magnus? I'm like, we've had a Magnus before. He's the SmackDown general manager. It was weird.
I'm sitting there, and to me, when they turned around and they're like, oh, well, we're going to cancel the Meat Madness match because some of the guys were injured.
Yeah, Miro and Keith Lee weren't available.
But then they're going to turn around and say, but we're going to put all 3 of the guys in to the scramble match.
Right. The word all-star was lacking in that match, actually. Yes, you had Jericho, and you had Jericho, you had Wardlow, who's been a star since he got to AEW. They're trying to make a star out of Powerhouse Hobbs. But the remainder of the people in that match, we barely see them.
That was more of a well, we don't have a 24/7 title here, so let's just put them
Right.
in this match.
That was their way of saying, look, Wardlow needs a way to get a title shot. We got to give it to him. I would have rather him go one-on-one with Jericho and Jericho lose. And okay, you're the number one contender.
That would have been the nice thing. Or, not even Wardlow. If you wanted to shock everybody, which I know they weren't going to do this, Dante Martin.
Right.
Or,
Right.
any of them. But the way they did it, it was so wonky. I'm like,
Yeah.
ugh.
They threw 8 guys in a blender and said, here, do what you want. And
Exactly. That was more of a, okay, we have nothing for these 3 guys. Because you notice also this pay-per-view, they didn't have the usual
Battle Royal or ladder match or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, the match where they go up and they get the Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah, the ring. Yeah, that makes no sense to me.
Face of the Revolution.
Right. Yeah.
They didn't have, so this may have been their version of, okay, we have to have the Face of the Revolution. Okay, that's all well and good. But where I think, and we were talking about this before with the whole storytelling thing, this was like, okay, I figured Tony Khan was sitting in his office at Daly's place, and he had a tired dartboard of all the wrestlers.
Mm-hmm.
And he just started chucking and going, okay, Magnus, you're in. Dante Martin, you're in.
Right. Hook and Brian Cage are feuding. They're definitely in.
Jericho, because we have to have a big name in this match, you're in.
Right. Here's what bugs me about Jericho. And I'm not going to go off on a tangent or anything like that, but like about 2 weeks ago, it was reported Jericho's going on hiatus so he could go and tour with Fozzy. And then a week later, he's right back on Dynamite. And then a week later, he's on Collision saying, I'm going to win the All-Star Scramble. And I'm like, why can't he? And I'm not saying he needs to go away forever. I get it. He's one of their biggest names there. If anything, he's the biggest name they have there as far as star power. But I think Jericho is overused. I think Moxley is overused. I think they need to slow down, pull those guys back a little bit and say, hey, we have some homegrown stars that we need to get over a little more.
Yeah, but you bring that's an interesting point. But that's the one thing Tony Khan has been so big on since AEW started is going with the WWE, going with the former WWE guys.
And that's why TNA fell the way that they did for so long. They were pushing the WWE talent. Meanwhile, guys like AJ Styles, Bobby Roode, James Storm, who all came up through that tunnel system, were just sitting there going, okay, we're here. Hi.
Exactly. Actually, Archie, we do got some comments coming in here quickly.
Okay.
One of them actually is our good buddy of ours, Chaz.
Hey, Chaz.
Who just wanted to mention your name and my name.
Hi. Okay. Makes sense. Is he in the closet doing that? Is he at work in the closet texting our names?
Probably,
yeah. Knowing Chaz.
Hopefully he's not drunk tonight.
Hopefully.
But, I mean, you look at what AEW's done, and one of the things I'm not coming at this from somebody who's in the industry. I'm the first one I've said that countless amount of times.
Oh, definitely.
But my biggest issue with Tony Khan is 2 things. I mentioned before about the storytelling. Mm-hmm. And it's the fact that he relies so much on these guys like Moxley, like Jericho.
Right.
And you said it perfectly. You got guys there who are homegrown guys who I don't know who the hell they are. And I figure, I guess in Tony Khan's eyes, he figures, okay, guys like Moxley, guys like Jericho, guys like Bryan Danielson are going to draw in views. But it hasn't.
But look at something, though. All right. We mentioned a lot of the matches. Look at one of the matches that happened at this pay-per-view. Eddie Kingston versus Bryan Danielson. That was a knockdown, drag-out fight. Those 2 guys were hammering the crap out of each other for at least 25 or 30 minutes. And at the end, Kingston won. And in my opinion, Kingston is an AEW guy because he was in TNA. He's never been to the WWE. He wasn't in WCW. He's still new to the public eye. So you let somebody go over Bryan Danielson, and Bryan Danielson even shook his hand. And they had a great, respectful match. You know what I mean? But then you look at the way Wardlow won the All-Star Scramble, and it would have been better for him to go over Jericho because that's the bigger name.
I don't remember who did he even pin. Oh, did he pin Dante?
He might have pinned. Yeah, I think he pinned one of the smaller guys. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm laughing at the whole thing. You know, you brought up the Eddie match. Honestly, I love that match. I thought that was a
Yeah.
hard hitting. I mean, I remember seeing when Eddie took on Moxley at World's End,
Right.
and where we were sitting, because it was myself, it was Ryan, and Billy came. A few other people came. We were all the way up, and like the third, like the basically we were able to see the walls of the Nassau Coliseum.
Right.
That's how far up we were, and a lot, and just hearing those chops.
Right.
Those things, and I mean, yes, granted, I've been chopped as well. I was chopped by Marina Shafir about 2 years ago.
Oh, that had to hurt.
Oh yeah, that's done quite
Ow.
a bit. And you get chopped by somebody like Eddie, you're feeling it.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Eddie is a great throwback to the old guard, the strong style of Japan, and so is Danielson. So, and again, they use Danielson to get Eddie and that new title that they're trying to develop over. Great job. You used Moxley in a tag team match with Claudio, and him and Claudio had a great match with FTR. And yeah, I know they're both all four former WWE guys, but you're still trying to build FTR as the dominant tag team of your company. But yet they lost to the makeshift team of Claudio Castagnoli and John Moxley. It's weird because now something's telling me that being that the tag titles were vacated, we might get Moxley and Claudio as the new tag team champions.
Oh, I could see that. I could easily see that.
You know,
But what I'm also curious, and we'll get into the whole title vacancy thing in a second here because I want to get into Sting and that whole ending.
right?
But I agree with you though. I think you could have, and I said this last week on the show, that I said whoever wins that match is going to be gunning for the titles.
Definitely.
And somebody commented on the show. I don't remember who it was, saying, oh, they don't need, Blackpool Combat Club doesn't need the belts.
They don't.
And I agree they don't. But the way AEW, the way Tony Khan, his warped mind thinks,
right?
He figures, okay, you put the belts on two former WWE guys. Also, you can get that casual player to sit there and go, oh, wait, I remember Moxley from when he was, and then all of a sudden, you're going to go from 800,000 to 929,000.
I wish that was the case. I wish that was the case. See, you've heard Andy Shivkumar. Shout out to our buddy Andy Shivkumar, who runs the Fantasy Wrestling League in the Asylum. And you've heard Jeff Napolitano say it to me. I'm not the core audience. I'm not the target audience of what they're looking for. In this instance, I am. I'm the fan. I'm the one watching. And if I see you jamming Moxley, Claudio, Jericho, and all these former WWE guys down my throat, I'm going to get pissed off like I am. And when I watch a product, I'm going to become very critical of it. And I'm going to become Jim Cornette and going, this is shit. This isn't what I want to watch. Now, WWE does it. They're cramming The Rock down our throat right now, but at least the Rock is going back to his heel roots and making us believe again that he's a heel and he hates Cody. But then when you look at the undercard and everybody else, Seth Rollins and Drew McIntyre are doing great things. You know what I mean? Gunther is a phenomenon that can't be beaten. Chad Gable wants to be the guy to beat him. So does Sami Zayn. So they are trying to give us new talent at every other level. With AEW, it's almost like, the way they always say in wrestling, there's that glass ceiling. Well, on top of the glass ceiling are guys like Jericho, the Young Bucks, Moxley, and Omega, who's injured, unfortunately, here. And then everybody else over here is just trying to get to the top, but then one of them pushes them back down. And I don't know if it's Tony Khan or them refusing to lose.
It's probably a combination of both, because I could see somebody like Jericho or somebody like the Young Bucks having a massive ego backstage.
Yeah.
Saying, why am I going to... I can see Jericho. I can easily see this with Jericho. And again, I don't know Jericho personally.
Right.
But just the way his character comes off on TV, I can see him being the type of guy where he goes, why am I going to take the pin?
Right.
Where realistically, I just remember this, if he would have taken the pin Sunday night, if Wardlow would have pinned him it wouldn't have affected it because he's Teflon.
I agree. And you go to, hey, Jericho and Wardlow could have a feud for about a month because Wardlow isn't going to challenge for the title immediately. I think
No.
we know that. I don't think Wardlow will be having a title match at Dynasty. You know what I mean? So we get so you have that feud with Jericho, which makes Wardlow a bigger name in some ways because when he beats Jericho in the end of it all, it makes it a little better. You beat a big name. You beat the goat. You know what I mean?
And folks, what Archie just mentioned about him not having a title match at Dynasty, I don't want people to get confused here.
Right.
We're not talking about the Dynasty company in upstate New York that I have done the kickoff show for. Another friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, your friend Billy does the backstage interviews. No, we're not talking about that Dynasty company.
No.
I just want to make that clear.
We're talking about AEW's next pay-per-view.
Which I definitely want to dive into that because, that caused a bit of an interesting conversation. But let's get to now what was the main event with Sting and, with his whole thing. What did you think of the fact that, well, first, I mean, I wasn't surprised of the two guys who ended up being on screen with Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair.
Not at all, because Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair have been focal points of Sting's career. And they're good dating back to his time in the NWA. They were perfect as the timekeeper and Flair being in Sting's corner. We got to see other people around Magnum TA and Nikita Koloff and other aspects of the NWA. I don't know if it's true because of what Kevin Nash said on his podcast that he wasn't allowed to go to the WWE to go to AEW because he's under a WWE Legends deal. But then Nash reiterated saying, "It's not that I'm not allowed. I just don't want to be seen on camera there." So,
well, I think from back in his day, I think there was that whole thing was you would get in trouble if you were seen on camera on a competitor's.
That, and I think he doesn't want to be affiliated with AEW.
I know Lex Luger was there.
Yeah, Lex Luger was there. A lot of Sting's great older friends were there. And the match was not bad. Given that it was a death match or whatever they want to call it, hardcore, falls count anywhere, it was good for what it was. It allowed Darby Allin to shine,
Well, the only thing I will say is I didn't realize Nick Gage was booking that match.
No, if Nick Gage was booking it, there would have been a pizza cutter involved.
Well, because all of a sudden I'm sitting there, and at one point they're going to under the ring, and they're taking out a thing of glass. I'm like, what are we? I'm like, we're about to go
to a bad place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's the one spot I use this when we open the show up tonight. They have the sheet of glass on the chairs.
Yep.
Darby goes up to the top rope because he thinks he's Jeff Hardy. Which, by the way, on a side note, I'm surprised the Hardys were not on this card.
Well, Jeff is injured.
Yes, which I want to get into that because that's actually brought up the thing with Sammy Guevara. Definitely want to get into.
We'll get into that, yeah.
But, Darby goes up because, again, he thinks he's Jeff Hardy. And also he goes to do this, I think it was a swanton.
Swanton or some kind of leap for the heavens. And Matt moved Nick out of place, and which Nick was not laying down; he was standing. So that was going to end pretty badly if he did land on Nick Jackson.
And you heard and then when I saw that shot, I'm like, yeah, there's no way Darby's coming up from this again.
No, he implanted into that glass, which imploded, flew everywhere, and poor Sting, who was lying down at the stage, had to come back and fight the rest of the match alone. The only part that I did not like about this match was Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair getting involved. And it's not because they're too old, but damn, Ricky, you stopped him from using the belt, but you didn't stop him from murdering Darby Allin on the ladder with the glass. You didn't get involved before any of the other stuff went on, but the belt was a no-no.
Or with Rick, who, first of all, sold a freaking kick like he was like keeled over or something.
He looked dead, but his head was raised up so he didn't touch the glass on the floor.
And I remember watching. I mean, he sold. And one thing I give Rick credit for, even though he's about 103 years old right now, he sold it perfectly.
Yes, he did. He did. He sold it the way he was supposed to.
And the funny thing is, I'm just sitting there and I'm like, because originally that's what I thought they were going to go with, was it was going to be Rick versus Sting.
Right.
But I thought it was a decent match.
Yeah.
The part I laugh at was first of all, the entrance for Sting. I like the little, obviously he had his two sons, obviously, as you saw in the thumbnail. He had his two sons dressed up as two different versions of Sting.
Right.
It was almost similar. I don't know if you remember Double or Nothing when they did the first one back in Vegas. And Jericho had his entrance.
Right.
And it was different versions of Jericho.
Yep. The jacket, the list. Yep.
It was the exact same thing. But the part I popped for was when we heard Metallica.
Right. Right.
I was like, oh, I'm also a huge, I'll say right now, I'm a Metallica mark.
Oh, I am too. And if any, I'm about to share my age a little bit. If anybody remembers Napster and how mad Lars got when they were stealing their music, I'm like, oh yeah, Tony Khan paid out the butt to get Metallica and he let them use Ride the Lightning.
I figured they would have. Hey, what would be even cool is if you had Metallica play it live.
Right. I would have popped for that even more. But yeah, that added to the theatrical vignette of him watching his career in the theater was okay. It was a little corny, a little movie-ish, but it was still okay. It sucked that they couldn't use stuff from the WCW and TNA library because obviously WWE owns the WCW library and TNA has sold their library to TKO. But it is what it is.
Supposedly, from what I read, they never even asked.
Well, I don't know if they did or not. If they did,
they didn't, supposedly.
Well, then Tony Khan's lying to people that they wouldn't let him use it.
Yeah, supposedly from what I read is that they supposedly never even asked WWE. But I figured, I mean, I was looking this way. As you said last time, Monday Night Raw, they acknowledged his retirement, though.
Right. Exactly.
So I think they would have allowed him to use the footage. Because, again, people have to realize this isn't freaking Vince running the company anymore.
Exactly.
We're under a new regime now. But overall, if you were to give it a grade of A, B, C, or D, or F if you want to give it an F.
A being the best and C being like mediocre?
Okay, let's do, give it a grade of either A, B, or C.
Okay. I'd have to give it a C because in my opinion, except for Eddie Kingston and Bryan Danielson and the triple threat match, and of course the homage to Sting, the rest of the card was just subpar. It could have been saved for any other television show or special. What do they call their belt nights? Battle of the Belts or the champion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It didn't have to be on pay-per-view.
No, but I could see where you say that. I'm going, I would say a B- for me.
Okay, we're not far off then.
I would say a B- and I agree with you. I think a lot of it could have been a simple Dynamite,
right,
or something else. There was really nothing. Yes, obviously, Sting's last match. Okay, that was what the umbrella was over it, so to speak.
Right, but it was 5 hours long. I tuned into the kickoff at 7, and the show didn't end until 12 o'clock. And then the annoying part was, okay, Sting had his match. The man's on the microphone, and you cut the pay-per-view feed.
That I thought was idiotic.
You couldn't buy 5 more minutes? You're a billionaire.
Not only that, it's his last time.
Right.
Because what I think they should have done, and I think the whole thing, because supposedly they had the entire roster coming out after.
Exactly. It's not.
I think you could have either cut one of the matches a little bit shorter.
Well, I mean, they're on what are they on? Bleacher Report? They're not on. Yeah. That's their pay-per-view provider. Tony Khan couldn't call the owner of Bleacher Report and be like, "Hey, dude, We're running a little bit late. We need Sting to get 5 more minutes. I'll pay you whatever the outcome's going to be tomorrow. You know what I mean? Or something. Ric Flair retired at WrestleMania against Shawn Michaels. The next night on Raw, they gave him 35 minutes to say what he wanted to and have the whole roster come out and say goodbye to him.
Yeah,
Obviously, he didn't stay. He didn't stay retired, but I mean, my point is, you couldn't give Sting 5 minutes to get his thoughts and everything in order and say what he wanted to after he just went through a pane of glass for you.
yeah, and that's the funny thing that I laughed though with the whole thing.
Yeah.
But again, guys, if you're watching, let us know in the comments below what grade would you give the pay-per-view from Sunday night? Would you give it an A? A for being, A, it was the best thing you've ever seen. B,
Right.
meh in the middle, or C.
According
But
to Tony
guys,
Khan, it was the greatest pay-per-view in AEW history.
well, he says that for every pay-per-view.
Right. how
They,
how did a 17,000 seat arena beat the 81,000 seat arena that he had at All In?
which, by the way, I like one little thing they did. Yeah. All of a sudden, Ospreay's match, what's the biggest thing they're pushing?
All In.
That in August of 2024, sorry, they're going to be back in London again.
Mm-hmm. John, explain something to me. When they promoted the first All In at Wembley Stadium in London, they had 3 months to do it in. And in the first month, they sold 75,000 tickets. They've now been promoting All In Part 2 in London for almost 4 months.
Yeah, give or take.
Okay, it started the week after the pay-per-view, they started promoting it. They barely sold 10,000 tickets. What happened?
Okay, it's the same thing that how come AEW, I forgot where they were recently. They were, I think they were down south somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they only sold like 2,000 tickets.
Yeah. And Meltzer thought it was going to be like, by the end of the night, it'll be 3,500. Well, yeah, because you're going to balloon the number.
Well, because I think a lot of it is because that's why when you look at, when they do a lot of these shows in the States and they're like, oh, we had our biggest sellout ever. Yeah, you had 8,000 people.
Right.
Like a lot of times, when they come to New York, and there's 3 areas they usually use when they come to New York. MVP Arena, obviously the MVP Arena up in Albany.
Right.
UBS Arena out here on Long Island.
Right.
Or I can't say Nassau Coliseum because they were only there once.
Right. And they've never been to MSG yet.
But I think that's really it. Whenever they've been in New York, it's been either MVP Arena or UBS.
Right.
And even that, we're like, oh, yeah, we sold out. Yeah, you sold 9,000 seats.
Look, I understand that wrestling, they always balloon the figures. WWE's been doing it since the beginning of time. We'll never know if the Pontiac Silverdome at WrestleMania 3 had 93,000 fans or 91,000 fans. It always changed. I get that. And WrestleMania now is unfair to go by because you get 2 nights of fans. So you double those. If you get 80,000 the first night and 100,000 the next night, that's 180,000 fans. But it's over 2 shows. You know what I mean? But I think AEW needs to scale back a little bit and start playing 5,000 seat arenas, 6,000 seat arenas, instead of trying to sell out the 10,000 seat and 20,000 seat arenas or domes. You know what I mean? It just makes more sense. I'm not saying they have a shitty product. I'm not saying they have a shitty fan base. But if you see you are only capable of selling 3,500 tickets, what looks better, 3,500 in 5,000 or 3,500 in 8,000?
Oh, that's the first one.
Yeah.
But like on the flip side, I know next week they're gonna be in up in Boston,
right,
for the not debut of Mercedes Moné,
right.
But I'm just even next. What happened?
Which may also include the debut of a.
Oh yeah, Okada. But here's the funny thing: you have Okada. You're going to probably have Mercedes Moné. And I'm going to make the bet right now. They won't clip 1 million views.
They might, but it won't stay like that. If they do 1 million people watching on Wednesday, and then with all of the Facebook and YouTube videos and all that, if they do 1 million next week, by the following week it's going to fall to like 875,000. The next week it'll be 750. They'll jump back up to like almost 1 million before the pay-per-view. It's what happens in wrestling,
Yeah. But then you look at somebody like Monday Night Raw, who they're averaging about a 2.1 to a 2.3 every week.
Yeah, but last year they were only doing 1.5, so you see it evens out. Not everybody does great business all the time. We get that.
No.
We know that. But at least tell us you're not doing great business. Don't have your hype man Dave Meltzer go, well, it was 875,000 people watching, but that's not including DVR, and that's not including that, Dave. It was 875,000 people watching live. That's what mattered. Look, I have heard this argument from a lot of people in the last couple of years, John. Ratings don't matter anymore because with DVR and streaming and everything, the ratings don't matter. And I get that. But I was born at a time when the ratings mattered. The Monday Night Wars, when they were doing 4s and 5s, 5.5, 5.6, and they were battling, and they hit 8s sometimes. An 8.0 means you had almost 10 million people watching your show that night. And now it's a quarter of that. So we know wrestling went into a downturn, but don't give us the reasoning that it's not about the ratings. Well, it's got to be because people are watching.
But and I agree with what you're saying. To me, when you get, especially with Meltzer, and I love when Meltzer turns around and goes, or like everybody starts talking, oh my God, the ratings came out. I'm like, AEW has been around now 4 years.
Going on 5, yeah.
I think they may have clipped 1 million
a few times,
but that was only on nights when it just happened to be that WWE was on the same night as them, or if they happen to have a big name showing up. But even big names, I mean, we saw it last week. Offspring made his debut or his return, so to speak, if you want to call it that.
Right.
I think they only averaged like 800,000 because I think the thing also, what people are forgetting, the people who watch AEW are more of the hardcore fan base,
right?
Where it's people like people take any of the guys and gal from the Asylum Wrestling League, take any of the people who we see at Wrestle Bash. See, nice little plug there.
I like it.
Those are what AEW goes for, the hardcore fans.
Right.
They're not going to go for. You're not going to get Joe Smith sitting in his living room with his 2 kids flipping through the screen going, ooh, let me go watch Will Ospreay taking on, Kyle Fletcher.
Right.
And again, it's nothing against them.
No, the casual fan doesn't know who the guy is. The casual fan doesn't know who Kyle Fletcher is. They might have heard of Will Ospreay's name, and they're going to go, okay, I want to watch Will Ospreay wrestle tonight, but they don't care about who he's wrestling because they just want to see what he could do. And at the end of the day, please forgive me, Will Ospreay is a left-hand Ricochet. So if you watch Ricochet wrestle, you know who Will Ospreay is.
Yeah, and that's my whole thing, though. No, you're 100% right. But that's my whole thing is you turn around and, you expect somebody who's going to sit there who may, like I have friends of mine at work who aren't hardcore wrestling fans, but they watch it occasionally.
Right.
Especially because I'm there now. So a lot of times they'll walk in and be like, oh, did you see what happened on Raw last night or AEW? I'm like, did I see what happened? Yes, I know what happened.
Of course I did. Right.
I'm like, if I didn't hear about it, I heard it from 25 other people.
Right.
And I mentioned to them that, oh, Sting was still wrestling. And, they all looked at me, they're like, he's still wrestling. I'm like, this is the problem here.
Right.
Is that AEW does it, and I've said this on the show since we started the show in November of 20. AEW has to attract the casual fan.
I agree.
And I've been saying, the old saying of, people are going to die on the hill, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I will die on this hill saying that AEW needs to attract the casual fan, because the hardcore fan, you're gonna get the people who are going to spend $50 for a pay-per-view, who are going to spend $200 for a ticket, who are going to
Right.
cheer, boo, all that stuff. But that can only get you so far.
I agree.
Where you look at Tony Khan, and I've said this about Tony Khan since AEW started. Tony Khan is not a booker.
No.
He's just a fan who happens to have a lot of money.
He's a millionaire playing with action figures.
Exactly, and we were talking about this beforehand with the storyline. There's no storyline really. And yes, I mean, you have a few here and there, but a great example. They announced that Will Ospreay is taking on Kyle Fletcher on
the
Wednesday.
pay-per-view. On a pay-per-view.
No, on Wednesday.
No, but it was on the pay-per-view.
Oh yeah, on the pay-per-view.
So if you weren't watching the pay-per-view, you don't know that match is happening.
But again, it's like, okay, and why should I be invested as a fan?
Right.
That's my like I laugh. I'm more invested in TNA wrestling.
I know who Kyle Fletcher is because I watched New Japan, I watched Ring of Honor, but I did not know he was the Ring of Honor champion because I haven't watched Ring of Honor in like 3 months. You know what I mean? So it's like when he came to the ring with a belt, I'm like, what belt is that? You know,
Yeah.
Is that a New Japan belt? Did he win something overseas? Am I not aware of something? And then they announced he was the Ring of Honor champion. I'm like, when did that happen? Meanwhile, Ring of Honor is their second brand.
It's funny. Do you know I forgot Ring of Honor was even still around?
Yeah. You know, and at the end of the day, Tony Khan has to see significant drops if he's going to make any changes. Like they got to get to around 300,000 fans watching before I think he'll go, oh shit, we got to change some stuff.
Yeah, but he'll never. Even if they get that, he'll still turn around and go, "Oh, this is the best show ever."
Right. Which I get it. Hype your product. You got it. Look, a car salesman will always tell you this is the best car ever until you buy it.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's just a piece of shit that you bought. You know what I mean? So
exactly.
It's what happens.
But last thing I want to get to with AEW actually 2 things I want to get to the AEW before we transition over to WWE. The next pay-per-view.
Yes.
It was announced April 21st, live from St. Louis, yeah. AEW presents Dynasty.
Yes.
Now, guys, if you're in the New York, New Jersey area, and you're sitting to yourself and you're going, wait a second, I've heard the name Dynasty before. Folks, yes, you have. There is an independent company in upstate New York. They run shows quite often, actually. You might have heard of them. The last show, Velveteen Dream showed up.
Patrick Clark himself.
Yes. And then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, so we're going to announce this show. And I'm like, okay. But what I was laughing at was not only are they taking the name Dynasty, but the color scheme.
And the font, the logo.
It's like...
Now, I said this before we went on the air, John. I only know of the Dynasty because of you and Billy Ann. Billy Ann is a very good friend of ours. She's a backstage correspondent for them, our friend Billy. And because of you, because you go to the shows and you do the podcast for them, the opening and everything like that. And I've learned about them. I now follow them on Facebook. I know what their cards are going to be. I know who's on their roster. And the minute I heard it announced, as a fan who's never really seen the product yet, I went, hey, what are they doing here? That's not the other company. What's going on? So,
which is also funny because they were Dynasty was actually, or as I call it, the original Dynasty was actually trying to run a show April 20th.
Wow.
So I just sat there. I'm like, but I just left because it's the old saying of intimidation is at its sincerest form.
Yeah.
Or something like
imitation is the most sincerest form of flattery. Exactly.
Yeah. And when I saw that, I'm like, okay. I'm like, one issue I have, is I've noticed something with Tony Khan as of late. When AEW first started, they had 4 pay-per-views.
Right.
They had Revolution, Double or Nothing. I think it was all out because I actually happen to have the poster for All In right here.
Right.
All Out, and Full Gear. That was
Right.
it.
Right.
And I thought it was beautiful because the only other
Right.
promotion that had done that was NWA.
Yes, I agree.
But now all of a sudden it's, well, we're going to add World's End. Then we're going to add Dynasty. Then we're going to add, it's like, and I read something that supposedly they want to do, I think, up to 9 to 10 pay-per-views in a year. And I'm like, why?
To compete with the WWE, to compete with TNA. You look at when wrestling, when I first started watching wrestling in the early 90s, 1990 was my first year watching wrestling. Both companies, WCW and WWF, had 4 pay-per-views. So it was 3 months in between each pay-per-view. Was it the best product all year round? No, but when pay-per-view time came, you better believe you got to get they kicked it into high gear, so you expected more. You know what I mean? And then the Monday Night Wars started, and it was like, hey, we need more pay-per-views. Okay, we'll add King of the Ring. Well, if you add King of the Ring, we're going to add Sold Out. Well, if you add Sold Out, we're going to add, Over the Edge. Well, we're going to add Uncensored. I get it. Everybody wants the almighty dollar, but too much of something is not a good thing. You know what I mean? And AEW has proven that. I'll talk about this for a second. Their belt situation between AEW and Ring of Honor right now, there's like 12 belts rolling around. Meanwhile, they've only got 7 hours of television on TV a week.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know what I mean? Now, yeah, the WWE has probably just about the same amount of belts because tag titles, 2 world titles in the continental United States, 2 women's title, and then everything that they got going on NXT. But they've got 3 different shows and then 2 low-key shows that they've got going on. The NXT Level Up and Main Event, and then they've got 2 pay-per-views within, space of each other. So it makes sense to have that many titles. AEW does everything too much, too quick, too fast. You got to
Yeah,
dial it back a little bit with the pay-per-views, in my opinion.
exactly. And Archie, we do have 2 comments coming in now. I just want to bring them up quickly. We had a comment coming in here from Blocks, who's actually an independent wrestler from New Jersey, who his favorite pay-per-view was St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
Good pay-per-view.
But that only lasts. I think they only had one of them, if I remember correctly.
1 or 2, might have been 2, but I know the first one was main evented by Vince McMahon and Stone Cold in the cage, and that's where the Big Show debuted. So, yeah.
And actually, Archie, one thing with our show, we actually have a fan over in the United Kingdom.
Okay.
And he just wanted to let me know that he has the opportunity, I think it's the end of this month, actually, to go to his first independent show.
Excellent.
David, definitely let me know how it is, because one thing you're going to realize, and I've been to a fair share amount of independent wrestling. I think I could safely say at this point, you're going to have a freaking blast.
Indie wrestling is so much different than wrestling on television. Number one, you don't have the courtesy of a commentator, so you're just watching the match. You know what I mean? And pretty much commentating in your head. If you follow wrestling, you kind of commentate in your head. But you also get to meet so many different new stars as well as old stars. I remember taking my son. It was my 31st birthday. He and I went to go to a Jersey All Pro Wrestling show in Rahway. They don't run JAPW anymore, and we went there, and the main event was Homicide and Dan Moff versus Luke Harper or Brody Lee and Necro Butcher, and Brody Lee landed on my son's lap after being thrown off the top rope into the crowd. And I'll never forget it. This big burly guy who's bleeding turns up and looks at my kid and goes, "You okay?" And my son's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." He's 9 years old at the time. And I remember going, "Oh my God." And he got up and he finished the match. And after the match, he came out. He's like, "Did I get any blood on you guys? Are you guys okay?" There's that. And I just went, that's what makes indie wrestling so great. Because you get to be involved in the action. You get to meet these guys on a different level. You know what I mean? So,
I mean,
yeah.
like I said, I've had my fair share of going independent wrestling with going to New Jersey and upstate New York. And I've noticed one thing, and we'll get back in WWE here in a second. There's a total difference when it comes to the crowd.
Yes.
Where
Yeah.
you're in upstate New York, because like I said, I was just up in Empire Live back in actually a couple weeks ago. And yes, granted, there was a lot of people in that building. Obviously, we all know the big story. I've been talked about to death at this point. But, they were cheering, I've been to shows in Jersey, Ridgefield Park, New Jersey, to be more precise. And Archie, I think you know what building I'm talking about here?
Uh-huh. Yep.
The crowd there is so freaking ruthless sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. They're actually for people's heads in that arena.
I've said that building. I'm surprised. I feel like every time I leave that building, and folks, if you don't know what building I'm talking about the Mecca, Phil Sheridan building, 106 Bergen Avenue.
Yep.
I feel like every time I leave that building, I have to go to a doctor and make sure I didn't get some sort of disease. But it's just something with that building that it's
I
like
agree.
It's like I laugh, but we'll get into we'll touch on historical buildings in a second when we get into who they announced for the Hall of Fame. But you think about independent wrestling in New Jersey, and I mean Archie, you live in Jersey, so you know this quite well. I can ask anybody in the group chat who's a independent wrestling fan, and yeah, bingo, Block just said it perfectly. The Mecca is the indie version of Madison Square Garden.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It's something about that building.
It has an alive feeling to it. The building itself comes alive when there's a great match going on and the fans are into it, and you sit there. And I've been to the Garden, I've been to the Mecca, I've been to Meadowlands Stadium, I've been to big arenas and small arenas, and it doesn't matter. Something when there's a great match going on at the Mecca, you're just zoned in like a kid watching TV for the first time and going, "Oh my God, this is awesome."
Like there was a match I remember this was last June. There was a company called Win Wrestling Is Now, which is run by the SAT guys.
Julio and Joel Maximo.
Yep, they had an opening match. It was a 10-man. We called it a clusterfuck. That's probably the best way to put it.
Okay.
It was a 10-man eliminator match for the title for the inaugural champion.
Okay.
They went all over that freaking building.
Oh yeah.
And the reason I bring that match up is you felt it. And I always tell this to people, if you get the opportunity to go to a show at Ridgefield Park, it doesn't matter if it's recombination wrestling, it doesn't matter if it's pro wrestling magic or whatever. Go.
Block just made a great comment about the ceiling with the mirrors and everything. It gives it a different atmosphere. Yeah. You know what I mean? I went to a show there, John, it has to be like 13 or 14 years ago, and Teddy Hart and Jack Evans were on the card. Now, Teddy and Jack love to fly. You know that. You've probably seen them wrestle before. I'm sure many fans that are listening have seen them wrestle. And Jack went up top, and he stood up, and his head was like right under the roof. And he came back down, and you heard it plain as day. He looked at Teddy, he was like, "Teddy, I don't think we're going to be able to jump off of that top rope." I was like, "What the hell are you talking about?" He's like, "Look, watch." And he went back up, and he showed. He's like, "Jump!" And Teddy cursed him ugly, and he's like, "Jump, MF, jump!" And he did the tumble, and his feet hit the top of the roof and came down on his opponent. I'm like, damn, he almost broke the mirror on his opponent.
Like, I laughed. There was, and then, like I said, we'll get back into WWE here in a second. There was one show there where it was Invictus and NFW.
Okay.
We're running a joint show, and it was a match with PJ. Oh, PJ Savage took on Face.
Okay, I've heard of PJ.
If you ever seen these two guys in action, they killed each other. Basically, it's a nice way to put it. Mm-hmm. There was one spot in the match where, now I have to describe this for the people who have never been in this building. You walk in, you basically walk right into where the ring is.
Okay.
Obviously, blocks you're watching, exactly, Archie, you've been in that building, exactly the layout. You have the set of fire doors to the right. There's the ones right in the middle.
Right.
All of a sudden, Face is standing there like he's trying to sell the move. PJ Savage. Now, PJ Savage is not a small person.
Right.
He's a big dude. He ends up doing a spear. Takes Face through the door. I think they actually broke the door.
They went through and through?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yep. Blocks was even saying, he goes, I know exactly. Yeah. That it's just something with that building.
Yep.
And that was actually my first exposure to independent wrestling, was in that building.
And it gave you a memory that stuck with you.
Well, the what I had was the first show I went to was Brie Combination Wrestling with actually another good friend who you and I both know, Cheyenne.
Mm-hmm.
And the big thing I remember with that was they didn't have a bottom rope.
Oh God.
And it's funny. I still pick on Anthony Cole to this day because we were talking about, his upcoming shows. I go, are you going to have a bottom rope this time? He goes, shut up. Like, why?
He's like, I want to keep we're going to have a bottom, but we don't have a middle this time. It's one or the other.
I want to keep things moving here because, like I said, folks, we do have a lot more to get to. The other thing I want to get to with AEW, it was reported today Sammy Guevara is suspended now.
Yes.
For the fact that he did the move to Jeff Hardy after Jeff Hardy got the concussion.
The Go to Hell, which is a modified version of the Go to Sleep.
Now, it's not surprising. Sammy Guevara's been suspended a couple times.
Countless times, yeah. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the whole thing?
I think it's BS. Sammy Guevara is a great talent. And yeah, is he a little reckless? Yes, but he's still a young, up-and-coming talent who needs to be polished a little more. And Jeff Hardy is a risk taker. And obviously Jeff is gotten a little sloppy in his older days in the ring. So something there didn't click with them, and he got hurt. The ref should have called the match off, and should have just either been called a no contest or Sammy Guevara won by knockout, whatever, and move on. But you cleared Jeff to wrestle. The referee said, "Yeah, let him go, let him finish." I get it. Sammy wasn't supposed to hit his finisher, but you told me the guy was okay. You told me there was nothing wrong with him. He said he was okay. And Jeff obviously told him when he said go home, he gave him the okay to do the move. And from what I'm hearing, a couple days later, Sammy had a match with Powerhouse Hobbs after that. So why did the suspension take place? If you were, what took you so long to suspend him then if it wasn't immediate?
Yeah, to me, it just seems the timing just seems off.
Yeah. They had a week, and they taped that match a week before it aired on Rampage. So you had a week to think about it after that. And then he fought Powerhouse Hobbs the following week on Dynamite, which that feud made no sense whatsoever. Them even having a match together, they've been done with each other for a while. But okay, whatever. But you let them have another match, which was a no DQ match now, and then you suspend the guy a week and a half, 2 weeks later. It's like, what happened?
Well, I also think.
Go ahead.
No, I was saying I think they're also setting up something where I think they're going to turn the Hardys heel.
Yeah, they've been doing that with them, giving everybody the middle finger. And I'll be honest, was I a Matt and Jeff Hardy fan when I was younger? Somewhat. But I liked Edge and Christian and the Dudley Boys better when it came to the TLC matches. I think the Hardys need to go away now. Retire gracefully, or as gracefully as they can, and go do meet and greets and public appearances at indie shows and go into the WWE Hall of Fame when they're ready and be nice, happy older men. Because they're killing themselves slowly but surely.
Yeah. And what's funny is, you were saying about them doing signings and stuff. I was going to say there's a convention happening, I think, sometime this year. I could see them at.
Right. I've met both of them at indie shows. I met Matt at House of Hardcore. I met Jeff at an indie show when he was with TNA. And they're both great guys. I'm not disparaging what they've done for this business. They have transcended the ladder match and high flying wrestling. But they're now, I think Matt is almost 50 and Jeff is like 46 or 47.
Pretty close.
You know, Jeff is a recovering addict who I'm assuming when he gets injured would like to have a pain pill every now and then or something to cure the pain. So what's the use of getting injured anymore or hurting yourself? What are you doing it for? Is Tony Khan's money that good that you're willing to kill yourself?
I asked Darby Allin that question.
I guess, right? Yeah.
You can ask Darby that question. But obviously my take on it, I think, like I said before, I think the timing is ridiculous.
Yeah.
What is it going to show? The one thing I always say is this: pro wrestling is not ballet.
No.
And I'm not saying it to discredit what wrestlers do in the ring. I'm not taking that away from them. But you go, and I've spoken to a lot of wrestlers in the almost 3 years of doing this show.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing they've all have said, and I've heard it even from guys, in the big leagues, you take that risk.
Right.
It's like if you're going to be a carpenter, you're going to take the risk of losing a finger.
Exactly. If you're a fireman, you take the risk running into a building covered in fire.
Or if you're a cop, you get my point here.
Yeah, they know what they knew what they were signing up for.
Yeah, if you're a teacher, you run the risk of having a student, throw stuff at you.
Right. My feelings on it is, I think it just, maybe Sammy. Did we ask this when Foley went up? Right. Exactly. Thank you. David Gold just made a perfect comment. Did anybody ask? Why did Taker continue to beat the crap out of Foley and put his ass through the ring when he threw him off the cage? It's bad taste to suspend somebody because they hit a finishing move on a guy who he didn't even know was injured.
Which, by the way, bringing up Mick Foley, if you're in the New Jersey area next Friday, he will be at ISPW when they come to Hackenstown.
Yeah, Mick Foley hates me. He doesn't want to see me. He does, I swear. Every time I've met Mick 3 times, and I get a nice response, but I never get. He doesn't I don't know what it is.
But guys, like I said, if you want to meet Mick Foley, go to the ISPW show. I think from what I read, I think you need to have a ticket for the show in order to meet Mick.
Oh, that makes sense.
But I did read on another site that supposedly they are selling tickets just for Mick Foley. So I'm just go to ISPW on social media.
I know when he was in Rowway, it was you paid 20 for WrestlePro. It was 20 for your entry fee and then 20 to get either a picture or an autograph at the time, or 35 for both. So there was if you told them you were strictly there to meet Mick Foley and didn't mind have somebody watching you walk in, they let you walk in, get your autograph or your photo, and then they walk you out.
Yeah, so, which honestly, 35 for a combo is not bad.
Well, I'm also going back like 9 years ago. I don't know how much he charges anymore. When I met Ric Flair, it was $50 to meet him and Charlotte. Now it's $200 to just meet Flair. Thanks, Fitterman.
Yeah, but what's funny though, and I'm going to go back to WrestleBash on this one.
Right.
The guys that the stars at WrestleBash were in charge. I remember this from the last WrestleBash.
The most expensive guy there was Rob Van Dam, and that wasn't that bad. It was $80 for a combo of an autograph and a picture.
Yeah, most of them aren't going to charge it because for a lot of them, that's their way of income.
Right. I understand it. Look, I know. Okay, I'm paying if I go to just a meet and greet where there's no wrestling event, and I'm giving 20 to walk in, and then I know I got to pay everybody else that's there. You know what I mean? It ain't free. If there is a wrestling event included with it, like there have been in other shows, then by all means, then it becomes a bonus because you're given 20 to walk in, you pay however much you want to pay to meet the wrestlers, and then you get a free show afterwards.
Exactly. David Gold chimes in here and says, I'll pull it up right now. Good
Yeah.
luck to get Nature Boy. Yeah.
Well, he's
It's
now, according to AEW, he's the 21-time World Heavyweight Champion.
yes, and apparently according to AEW, Hangman Adam Page has lost it, apparently.
Yeah, right. Well, he lost it when he came out in those butterfly jeans about a year ago. Okay.
Well, I remember when he came out on the show, I'm like, Magnum TA is wrestling?
Right? That mustache is just damn.
But I want to
It's
keep things moving here because, guys, we still got a lot to get to tonight, including let's jump over now to WWE.
okay.
And before we get into what happened on Monday Night Raw, I want to get to the announcement that was dropped yesterday. Because of course WWE doesn't like to let us make it, let an announcement get dropped while we're on air. No, it has to drop before we go on air.
Right.
And that is they finally realize, Archie, they finally realized that, we have a Hall of Fame induction ceremony coming up.
Right. They usually start 2 months ahead of schedule, and then every other week we get an announcement. Now we're like 36 days away from Mania, and we finally got our first announcement.
And the first inductee, I think, is a no freaking brainer.
Should have went in 2 years ago.
But I think the fact they're in Philly.
Philly makes it all the more better.
Guys, the guy who we're talking about is the man behind ECW, the guy who's behind, I would say, some of the bigger named wrestlers out there. Your Taz's, your Sabu's, your Sandmans, the Dudleys, Ravens, and that's
Shane
Paul
Douglas.
Heyman.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Now,
Yes, sir.
here's the tough question to bring up. Who inducts Paul Heyman?
I agree. With Brock being kind of erased from history for the time being, it's not going to be Brock, obviously.
No.
But you have a laundry list of people. You could use Medusa, who he worked with in the Dangerous Alliance. You could use Arn Anderson if you can get him away from AEW for the time, which I don't think he's with AEW, actually. You could use, members of the Dangerous Alliance. If you don't want to go the WCW route, you can go with Bill Apter, who writes for PWI because they were both working for the company before Heyman joined WCW. But if they're going to go the ECW route, which I think they are, because we're in Philly, so might as well. If it's not Tommy Dreamer or Todd Gordon, then who else is it going to be?
Well, there was one other thing that was brought up, but he's bringing up Tommy Dreamer. I completely agree. But I saw some people on social media, and I realized that it's the IWC I'm talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
There was somebody who turned around and said, it should be Tommy Dreamer, and that Tommy Dreamer should finish his story.
So murder Paul Heyman live at the Hall of Fame?
Yeah.
No.
I heard that. I was like,
yeah, that's ridiculous. That is ridiculous. So we should see. So wait, Bret Hart. Yeah, David Gold brings up a good point, John. He says possibly CM Punk. That wouldn't be bad either.
Well, here's something interesting. Another they mentioned, then there was an idea brought up I heard today that could also be possible.
Okay.
How about Stone Cold?
Yeah.
Because Stone Cold was involved with Dangerous Alliance.
He went to ECW.
He was in ECW, which, by the way, did you know he debuted the same night that Bully Ray debuted?
I was not in ECW. Really?
September 23rd, 95.
Wow. That is a great fact. I didn't know that. I thought the Dudleys were in ECW in like 94. Well, no, 90. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, you know how the whole story of how the Dudleys got formed together, right?
Raven.
Well, no, the reason, the way it got pitched and everything, right?
It got pitched like that movie Slapshot. Those three brothers, I forgot what their names were, and they took just a bunch of random people and threw them together.
Well, the whole point of it was Bully apparently, and I call him Bully, but it's Bubba Ray, however you look at it.
Bubba Ray, yeah.
Turned around and looked at Paul Heyman and said, "Yeah, this babyface shit is not working. I think I got chemistry with Devon."
Right.
So it's something simple like that.
Right.
I heard the name of Stone Cold being brought up.
I like Stone Cold. I like Stone Cold. If it's not going to be an ECW guy, which Stone Cold was in ECW, Mick Foley is another name because he basically said, if anything, after Foley left WCW, he floundered. He didn't flounder, but back and forth between Japan and ECW is what got him his WWF job. So Stone Cold, Foley. I'd love to say Rick Rude, but he's unfortunately passed.
Well, I got another one. How about Taker?
Oh yeah, why not? Why not? Me and Mark on the same stage with Paulie dangerously. Why not?
Well, here's the other thing somebody that actually was brought up on myself. How about having 3 inductees for him?
I could see that. Each of them tell a story of what he's done for them.
But here's where you set it up, though. You set it up with somebody from the past, as far as WCW.
Right.
You have somebody for ECW, and then you have somebody for WWE.
I like it. The only bad part, the only thing I because he's with him right now, they might go Roman Reigns.
So he could sit there for 20 minutes and say, Philadelphia. Yeah, I'm like,
no. Right.
But honestly, like I said, I'm just curious to see now who else they put in. Because as much as I'd love to sit there and think Paul Heyman is a big enough name that he can go in by himself.
Right. I've heard rumors and grumblings because it's Philadelphia. It's going to be a ECW heavy show. So,
but what's funny is I brought up last week on the show. This is almost your opportunity now to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Where who knows? A, next time when you're ever going to be in Philly again,
right?
And B, a lot of these guys who are still around, like your Tommy Dreamers, your Ravens, your Sabus, your Tazes,
right?
They're not getting younger.
I agree. We almost lost Sabu last year. You know what I mean? So let's face it. And Raven, have you seen Raven lately? He looks older than Paul Heyman does.
I saw him at a Creative Pro show last May.
He I don't know what, and I don't think Raven was that big of a drug addict to say, oh well, it was the drugs. I just think he got old.
Okay, but then you look at somebody. I mean, a lot of these guys. My whole point is this: they're not getting younger.
No, I agree. And with them having a working relationship with TNA, they could bring in Tommy, for an induction. You got, if they were to do Heyman as the headliner, and then do Tommy, Raven, and Sabu, you have RVD put Sabu in, and for Raven, I get you could even you could do Stevie Richards to induct Raven.
Yeah.
Or Jacques Rougeau because he was with him as the Quebecers. Or Perry Saturn. Why don't I think I'd find Perry Saturn?
Yeah, I don't think Perry Saturn's doing much these days.
I don't know where he is though. Last they showed him, he was a recluse who won't leave the house. But that's a story for another day.
But I think also the big thing is, and I think this would have been a cool idea, is if you would have done the induction ceremony from the ECW arena.
Yeah, but they're doing it from the Wells Fargo Center, so.
But also, I bring up the ECW arena for another reason. Unfortunately, I don't have the picture right now, but it was announced last night that this podcast, Around the Ropes podcast, will be, as Timothy Ambler put it, the official podcast of the Block Party with special guests Timothy Ambler himself and ECW legend, WWE legend, WCW legend, Blue Meanie as well.
If you guys are just listening and not watching, I was doing the Meanie dance.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would, if I could make it there to be with you for that, I would love to ask the Meanie about the feud with JBL and him knocking JBL out at One Night Stand. But yeah, that's a big coup for you guys. Congratulations on that, John. That is a big accomplishment. You know, just being at any event for Mania weekend is huge, but to say you're going to be at the ECW arena doing an event the same night as night one of Mania is huge.
Well, no,
So
this is that Friday.
Friday, right? Well, yeah, but it's Friday night SmackDown and night one. I think it's the Hall of Fame too, right?
Yeah.
Hall of Fame is Friday. You want
Well,
to know what's crazy? I've been looking for Hall of Fame tickets because I'm going to night two of WrestleMania,
yeah.
and I might go to NXT the day before because it starts at 12 o'clock on Saturday.
Mhm.
But you cannot find a single Hall of Fame ticket. You have to buy it as a package with SmackDown, the Hall of Fame, and then the Raw the following night on Monday Night Raw.
Yeah,
And it's only I don't feel like going to Philadelphia 3 times in a week. You know, it'd be ridiculous. So
yeah, I could definitely see that. And the funny thing is, when this and people, I've had a few people approach me. They're like, "How did you do it? How did you do it?" I'll put it out there right now how I did it, and it was something very simple. I asked.
yeah, but you've been working your butt off too, man. People see what you're doing. People understand. They know your name. They see where you've been. You worked your ass off to get this podcast to where it is right now, and it's only going to get bigger and better. I know that. So you should
I
be proud of
appreciate.
that.
I believe me, I appreciate that. And we'll get, I'll touch on that stuff when we get to final thoughts in a second. But the fact that a show that started 2 years ago, it can say, in my list of accomplishments for this show, we're going to be, and it's funny, it's not like we're going to be like outside on like Swanson. I think it's Swanson Street over there.
Swanson and Richter, yep,
No, we're going to be in the building,
right.
which I get goosebumps with how much history has been in that building.
I went to Icons of the Ring a couple of years ago with David Gold, Nick Francis, and the guys of the Asylum. And as a kid, I was never allowed at the ECW arena because you mentioned going to the Mecca in Jersey and feeling like you needed a flu shot or something afterwards to make sure you didn't catch anything. My father thought ECW was garbage. My father was like, "You're going to go there and you're going to get stabbed, you're going to get cut, or you're going to end up with a disease." It's like, Dad, it's wrestling. No, that's too rough of a place. And I'm like, okay. So walking in there as an adult, I know what those goosebumps, feeling, seeing the bird's nest in the sky where Raven hung Tommy Dreamer, and you know Dreamer went through tables because of Brian Lee, and Terry Funk lit Mick Foley on fire. It's the greatest. Like I said, I've been to Madison Square Garden, I've been to the Meadowlands, the Giant Stadium, but for some reason, the ECW arena for me is just like the greatest arena to walk into and get a vibe. So,
And I mean, I when the post came out, it kind of took me back a little bit.
I'm sure.
Because, and I mean, people know of the story about this podcast and everything it's been through. And like I said, I've had people, I'll be honest, I think there's people who are legit not pissed, but they're jealous.
It's going to happen in all walks of life.
And my comment I tell people is this: look, you don't get to where this podcast is getting. I didn't get to the point with this podcast off of my good looks.
Okay.
I'm just saying, it's the fact of being told, and this sort of goes into the post that Tim put out last night, being told by so many people, you don't have what it takes. Being told you shouldn't be doing this. I had one guy, I will never forget this, who turned around to me one time, and this one I was doing sports podcast at the time, who said, "I'm not a good host. I should do smooth jazz instead."
Do you play anything that's a smooth jazz instrument?
I can't play an instrument to save my life.
So what the hell was he? What the hell does that mean?
But my whole thing is this: pushing, and this was going to be my last go around with podcasting. Was this show?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that, I mean, there are people who, and a lot of podcasts can't really say this about having a fan base because of the fact a lot of times podcasts are not consistent as far as with their days.
Right.
But to turn around and sit there and say that with everything that this show has been through, and I thank the fans a lot. And I'll get, like I said, I'll go more into it when I do final thoughts here towards the end. But this is a moment when I walk through those doors on that Friday. If I don't shed a tear, I'm not human.
Well, then when you finish up the podcast that night, if you don't end it with a tear in my eye, like Ric Flair did at the Rumble, then you're definitely not human.
But that's my whole thing. And like I said, we'll get more into that later on. But last thing I want to get to before we wrap up the show for tonight. We found out the IC title match at Mania, where everybody thought it was going to be a ladder match. And we're getting a gauntlet match next week on Raw. They announced the 6 guys. Realistically, who do you see winning this gauntlet?
Well, I think it could go one of two ways. There is a third possibility, and I'll get into that after I say the first two. But if it's not Sami Zayn or Chad Gable, then it's a crying shame because both of them deserve that match. Chad Gable because of how much he's busted his butt to get himself over organically with that whole Alpha Academy gimmick and the matches he had with Gunther. And Sami Zayn because, well, he's Sami Zayn. The fans still love the underdog story. I hope it's Gable more than Zayn because Zayn had his WrestleMania moment last year. But either one I'd be happy with. The other third ulterior motive, and just hear me out fantasy booking wise, Imperium comes out and takes out everybody in that match. And then Adam Pearce makes it the 6-man ladder match that we were hoping for.
That's what I'm hoping for as well. And I agree with you. I think it's got to be, realistically, I think it's got to be Gable.
Right.
Because there's a story there.
Based on what he said to Gunther, I'm going to take the smile off your face and put it on my daughter's at Mania. Yeah, that makes feel good TV.
But now, realistically, with Gunther, do you finally drop the belt with him at Mania?
I think it's safe, yeah. I think you finally reached a point with Gunther where you can let him drop the title safely and then start challenging for the world title because what is he, over 600 days as champion?
Yeah, I think he eclipsed Pedro Morales, I think, last month.
Right. So he's number one. He's the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion of all time. What more are you going to do with him? You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I'm just going to say this right now. This road to Mania, I mean, obviously, Archie, you've been following wrestling a lot longer than I have. Have you ever seen a road to WrestleMania be as intense and as crazy as it's been right now?
No, because every match seems like a main event quality, There was a joke a while back when CM Punk first left the WWE. He said, I always wanted to be the Mania main event. And Triple H looked at me one night and said, well, every match at WrestleMania is a main event. And I said, that's not true. It's the last match that ends the show. But when you look at the Mania card we're getting, you've had the slow burn and tension of Bayley versus Io Sky. The 1 year of waiting between Rhea Ripley and Becky Lynch. Cody finishing the story and now The Rock getting involved. So now we're getting a crazy tag match the night before. And then the main event being Roman Reigns versus Cody. McIntyre and Rollins have been busting their butts and wrestling each other for the last 6 months. So that's another great story. Anything else they give us is just going to be bonus. You know what I mean? Because the 5 matches I just mentioned are enough for anybody. You know what I mean? You still got the women's tag titles, the Intercontinental title, the United States Championship. We might see a debut of Braun Breaker at Mania in some capacity. Randy Orton and Logan Paul in their troubles. AJ Styles and LA Knight. There's so much going on in WWE right now. They are storyline heavy. I don't think anybody doesn't have a story right now.
And that's that's one thing I've said on the show for the longest time now. Storytelling is what's key.
Yes.
It doesn't matter, because to me, as a fan, and I'm talking not just WWE and AEW, I'm talking independent wrestling as well.
I agree.
If you turn around and you put two guys together in a match, but there's no build behind it,
right?
Why would I then, as a fan, be emotionally invested in it?
Well, I agree with you. The only way that match is going to get over now is if those two guys go out there and put on an epic match that makes me go, wow, okay, that was great. But then if you do nothing to build off of that afterwards, then what?
Like, I'll give you a great example of a match that had no build but told a great story, and it was on the independent level.
Mm-hmm.
It was Ace Entertainment, American Championship Entertainment. They just made their return a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
The main event, because it was Hero Celebration, it was to celebrate Mike Morgan Jr., who unfortunately passed away, I think, 10 years ago, if I remember correctly. The main event saw Jay Lethal taking on somebody you know quite well, Danny Moff.
Yes.
And yes, guys, I know there was a whole story when Ryan was on here. Yes, I accidentally called Danny Moff Jay Lethal by accident. They look very similar. What do you want?
Dan might be happy you said that about him, but don't let Jay hear you say that about him.
I told you're gonna laugh. I saw Jay at Dynasty show, maybe a week or two after.
Right.
And first of all, he actually remembered me from the Ace show. And I said to him, by the way, I actually called Moff. I actually referred to Moff as you. And he looks at me, he goes, you did what?
You did what?
I told him the story, and he starts laughing.
That was good.
He goes, that's definitely a new one. I'm sorry. It was a long week. I was exhausted.
No, Jay is cool like that, though. He doesn't hinder on things like that. He met my son at a TNA show when my son was 8. He put my son in a headlock as for the picture. And I showed him the picture at WrestleMash this year, WrestleMash 2. And he's like, oh, God, I remember that. He's like, I thought you were going to yell at me for putting your kid in a headlock. I'm like, no, it made the picture better.
But all I'm going to say is this. Guys, we're on the road to Mania. We're only a few weeks out from Mania.
Yes, sir.
The Around the Ropes podcast will be your home for all coverage regarding WrestleMania. We'll more likely have a predictions video coming out as we get closer to Mania. We'll also have more Mount Rushmore videos coming out. Apparently, the Mount Rushmore video that me and Eric put out 2 days ago is I think I just checked before. It's up to 103 views already.
Well, I mean, you did have Kenny Powers on your podcast. Anybody could respect that.
Well, I also coined him the expert in the expert in Mount Rushmore's apparently. But this is going to be, guys. The one thing that's going to be happening now for the next couple of weeks is there's going to be a rotating door of guest co-hosts joining me.
You mean I don't have the job?
You're more than welcome to come back.
But what you promised me red M&Ms and $12.50 cash. God damn it, John.
How about this? I'll let you and Jeff Napolitano have a fight at Mania. How about that?
I thought me and Ryan were fighting for custody of you at Mania.
Okay, who's the ring? We never figured this out, by the way. Who's the ring announcer?
Billy. Oh, Cheyenne. We have a ring announcer and a backstage correspondent in our realm.
You know what's funny?
We just need a ref.
That's very easy. I could make a few calls. But it's funny you bring up, about with being the ring announcer. I would just laugh if that were to happen, and Ryan would have to sit there and have somebody ring announce for him.
Right.
I would be laughing my ass off.
He would just be looking at him going, "You're doing such a bad job at this. Give me the microphone."
And then all of a sudden that Billy will look at me and go, "Nope, Billy, you're doing a good job." But yeah, it was just but I can't tell. I think there's 6 or 7 promoters between New York and New Jersey who have actually tried to book Ryan and me in a match.
That's funny.
And I remember that just happened recently, and I said to Ryan, I said, "What is it that these promoters want? They want to see us go into a ring with each other?"
Yeah.
But we had
I'm sure
at one
there's some
point we
listeners that would want to see it too.
yeah, I know there's one group chat that would love to see it. I'll put it right now. If I put a poll in that group chat about who would love to see Ryan Peterson versus me in a match, how quick would that reach 100%?
I give it a couple hours because everybody's working, but once they saw the poll, they'd click yes. So
I'm actually after the show. I'm actually put it in there just for shits and giggles. But,
John, can I do a couple of shills real quick before we end out?
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank John for allowing me to be on the show. I am a part of another podcast as well, and it is on WrestleNet Radio, which is owned and promoted by Nate Maxon of the Asylum as well. So make sure that you check out the We Can't Wrestle podcast weekly on WrestleNet Radio. We are currently in the middle of our PWI 500, the countdown, and it is from 1998. So there are a lot of crazy names in the back end of that. And once we get to like the top 100, we're going to start hearing really, really good names. So please don't hesitate to check it out and continue to give John your support because, as you can see, your support is helping him continue to grow, not just in the podcast community, but in the world of professional wrestling. So,
also, I want to give a little bit of a shout out to that little group chat that we have.
yes.
That sometimes they may be a little bit of pain in the ass. Sometimes. But I know all of them in there, they all mean well.
Oh, yeah. We become a family there.
They all mean well. And believe me, I can go down the whole list. You know, you got Jeff, you got Nathan, yourself, Shiv.
Matt, Justin, Justin, Billy, Josh. Let's see. We don't want to leave anybody out. And I'm already leaving people out.
Roger
Talent.
Garver.
Oh God. Gary.
Yeah.
Eric Matthews, who was on the show already. We've all known each other for quite some time on Facebook, like 5 or 6 years, with all the wrestling groups and the figure groups. And my brainchild was to do a fantasy wrestling league. Shiv took it over when he wanted to do the fine tuning and add extra points and things. And it's just been a lot of fun. Do we rag on each other? Yes. Do we make crazy statements about one another? Yes. But at the end of the day, it's because of our love of wrestling and our enjoyment of talking to one another. So.
And I'm very appreciative of it, especially, you know, with everything I've been going through as of late. I'm very appreciative of everybody in that group. Even though it's weird to think I'm the youngest one in that group by like 10 years.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened.
I realized honestly,
I didn't realize that everybody in that group was so old, to be honest. I thought I was the oldest, and then I found out Ronell was the oldest. And then we found out Billy and me are the same age. Then we found out, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, I thought I was the old grumpy guy in the group.
And then everybody looks at me, they're like, oh, look, John, he's the baby.
Yep. For the longest time, it was Josh that was the youngest, though, because Josh was only like 34.
But I will say this much, though. I know you said before, you know, a lot of you guys have known each other now for about 5 to 6 years.
Yep.
You know, through various wrestling groups. And I'm just appreciative you guys welcome me in.
Oh, without a doubt. The minute Billy mentioned you and after meeting you at WrestleMania, it was just like, you know what? He's definitely welcome because he's one of us. I could tell you were one of us the minute I met you. So
I appreciate that a lot. And guys, a few announcements, obviously, from my end. Like I said before, the podcast will be at WrestleMania week. I just drew a blank now on where, because literally, Archie, I kid you not, this is the last weekend where I don't have wrestling.
Right.
For like the next 6 months.
Nothing wrong with that, man. That's great.
And so I have next week, I will be up in upstate New York again for Immortal Championship Wrestling as they present Homecoming with the, I guess you can say the main act being Dirty Dango and Tyler Breeze.
Oh, wow.
Will be in action against Shane Stenson and Sebastian Braun. We'll have more on it next week on the show. I'm hoping to get somebody from Immortal to come on to preview the show. So we have that coming up. The following week, I will actually be making a debut. Not in-ring debut, but a debut with a company, Blitzkrieg Pro, based out of Springfield, Massachusetts. I will be going to their show on Friday, March 22nd. Again, we'll be doing a kickoff show from there. Just stay tuned to all of our social media accounts to find out the time and everything. And you don't know who's going to join us for that one. And there's going to be other news dropping with that, which I'm not at liberty to say right now. But check out Blitzkrieg Pro's Facebook page in the next couple of days. That's all I'm going to leave it as.
If you call the hotline at 1-900-909-9900, I will give you all the details that John can.
Okay, Mean Gene. Then obviously we got, Dynasties coming up as well with a couple of shows. Not the AEW Dynasty, but Dynasty. Right.
The real Dynasty.
Yeah, of course. Then, we got so much coming up. Probably WrestleDash 3, I'm assuming, at some point.
August.
Damn well I will be there and probably be doing the podcast live that night. Who knows?
Exactly.
But guys, I think it's safe to say we're going to wrap up for tonight. For Archie, I'm John. You can follow us on any social media account on Facebook. We're on Twitter, or X now. Sorry, I have to say it right. And we're on Instagram. If you're watching the show, we're on Twitch, we're on YouTube, we're on Facebook as well. Also, I'd like to mention the other part, you can also listen to the podcast as well, as the podcast is on, right now we're on Google Podcasts and we're on Apple. In the weeks to come, I'll put us back on other, but those are the two big ones right now. But again, guys, I appreciate all the support. It means a lot. But for Archie, I'm John. This has been Around the Ropes Podcast. Catch you guys next week.